Our next speaker is Mead Treadwell. Mead is chair of the 7-member U.S. Arctic Research Commission, which is appointed by the President of the United States. The Commission sets the goals for the U.S. Arctic Research Program and builds cooperation in research among federal agencies, the state of Alaska, universities, and international partners. As a senior fellow at the Institute of the North, Anchorage, he focuses on Arctic and security policy. Mead is also the CEO of Venture Ad Astra, an Anchorage and Portland-based firm which develops and invests in cutting-edge geospatial location and imaging technology. Formerly, he served as Deputy Commissioner of Alaska's Department of Environmental Conservation. He has helped to launch a number of research programs in government, the academy, and private enterprise during his career. And I know from personal experience that he is a strong supporter of our Arctic research agenda. So please welcome Mead Treadwell, who will talk about sustain Arctic science, sustain the Arctic, sustain the world.
Peter, thank you. Good morning. About 25 years ago, one of the first U.S. Arctic Research Commissioners, Dr. Luis Proenza, who is now the president of the University of Akron, walked into my office and he said, "Change is going to drive the next generation of science in the Arctic." And I said, "What are you talking about?" I thought it was sustainability. He had just given me Gro Harlem Brundtland's report. And he said, "No. The Earth is changing, and it is really going to be the core of the kind of research that we do." And as I watched the work of the Commission before I sat on it, one of the first things that the Commission was pushing for was a unified cross-cutting program across the government to look at environmental Arctic change. In this meeting here today, and the organizational work of ARCIS and the support of many different agencies in the search program and the follow-on Arctic observing program, shows that we really have brought that change to Arctic research in the United States and in the world. And I really want to thank and credit the leaders here who've helped make that happen. Not only do we have the coordination and the leadership, yourself, Peter, and Hayo coming on this and the search program, but I'd also like to recognize Dr. Bement for his leadership at the National Science Foundation, which really has produced change in the Arctic research program. His able chairmanship of IARPC has helped bring the government together at a time when we did produce this Arctic policy, the first time since 1994. He chaired the National Science Foundation and IARPC during the first International Polar Year in 50 years, which clearly has left Arctic science better off and will leave us behind with the region wired for sound, as it were, with observing systems, which we still have to be dedicated to make. He leaves us behind with the Alaska Regional Research Vessel, which he spoke of, which has been a long time coming. My late colleague, Dr. Dwayne Lively on the Commission, pushed hard for that, and I remember as a member of the Alaska Science and Technology Foundation putting up some of the first design money for that in the early 1990s. And it's tremendous to see that keel being laid and moving ahead right now, and thank you for that. And I also just want to say that on one of his last visits to Alaska, Dr. Bement called just as he got on the airplane and said, "Could we go see the Alaska Native Science and Engineering program?" Because NSF has put real money in to growing this pipeline of people, you, who are involved in Arctic science, and getting Alaska Native students from out in the bush being prepared to do math and science in college and going on to graduate school. And with NSF's help, that program now is extending around the United States. So I really want to say, Dr. Bement, thank you very much for your help, and I think we owe you a round of applause for the work that you've done. I don't want to start with a joke, but I do want to start with a punchline. I believe that if we do sustain Arctic research, we help sustain the Arctic and many, many things we love about it, and I believe the work you do helps sustain the world. That's a take-home message. I have the privilege of chairing a commission of 7 commissioners, as Peter mentioned. Many of us are here. We just met for our retreat Sunday here in this hotel, and then had a formal meeting yesterday, made a number of key decisions. But I'd like to introduce my fellow commissioners, our Vice Chair, Michelle Longo-Etter, who's here. Helvi Sandvik could not be here. Buck Sharpton is here from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. You'll hear shortly from Vera Metcalf. Vera comes from St. Lawrence Island, a place where you really can see Russia from your house. It's Warren Zapol's birthday today, so he got the day off. He's taking his 8-hour layover. And Charlie Voris-Marty is also here from City College of New York. And I thank and am very proud to serve with this dedicated group of people. Now, what's happening in Arctic research is part of what's happening in change in Arctic science and change in national science policy over the last few years. National goals in Arctic research come together in very important ways. In the recognition that science and research helps American competitiveness and jobs, helps us with our national security, and in the Arctic particularly with the new land that we're about to find on our sovereignty on the law of the sea, in growing the territory of the United States. In climate, not only understanding change, but getting to adaptation and mitigation as priorities. New and clean energy. The role of the Arctic in energy is very strong today. Energy plays an important role in the economies of all of the Arctic nations, and we are very much part of the challenge of getting new and clean energy. Ocean policy. We talked about, Laura talked about the work of the Ocean Policy Task Force. One thing that task force will produce is a new integrated Arctic Ocean research program, which I believe will be the first priority of IARPC in response to the goals report that we approved yesterday. And something very, very important, Commissioner Etter helped organize a conference on international fisheries after the United States put a moratorium on in the Arctic, and we brought the other Arctic nations together. And the one thing they could agree on is we do need to have common science in the Arctic Ocean. So I think the oceans policy driver is very important for Arctic research. And then finally is the sustainability driver, public health and disadvantaged communities, something you'll hear more about in this talk. The goals which we approved yesterday to recommend to IARPC, to the President, and to Congress for the Arctic Research Program continue the program IARPC has been working on for some time. 5 key goals: environmental change, this program, SEARCH, bringing the government together to study change in the Arctic. With the Arctic Ocean component, 2 years ago we pushed and agreed together to push the Arctic Observing Network component of SEARCH. And so the change that we see coming about is some greater work, integrated work in the Arctic Ocean. Arctic human health, very important to deal with some of the biggest challenges facing the population of the Arctic. Civil infrastructure, a workshop to be held to try to bring together infrastructure research across the U.S. government will be held in Fairbanks in April. Natural resource assessment and earth science, led by the U.S. Geological Survey. Indigenous languages, identity, and culture, and Commissioner Metcalf will be speaking to you a little bit about that shortly. What happens with our goals report is this. It goes to IARPC, a cross-cutting group of agencies, where we produce a 5-year research plan. That research plan is supposed to be reflected in a federal budget, and we are seeing some key increases in the Arctic research budget in several different agencies, notably this year in the NOAA and the NSF budget, with new activities perking up its head in places like the U.S. Navy, very significant. Our role as a commission is not only to help develop these goals and to develop Arctic policy, but we are also told by Congress to check back with them if the goals are not being met in the budget, and occasionally we do that. And one of the things the Commission committed to do this year is to have a very good transparent, to move more toward transparency in having and working with the Office of Science and Technology Policy and the Office of Management and Budget to make it very clear to you and to Arctic residents what's happening in the budget for Arctic research. And for that, I'd like to thank Dr. Kate Moran, who's here from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, worked with the Commission Sunday and yesterday on this initiative. And we've talked about the change that's happening in the Arctic and the drivers behind Arctic policy, the drivers behind Arctic research, and they all come back to sustainability. The issue of sustaining the Arctic, let's start with the people who live there. The people who live there have lived there successfully for 10,000 years or more. But today we have very high mortality rates. The suicide rate in Alaska alone is twice that of the nation. It's 4 times that of the nation for 20 to 29-year-olds. A very scary situation. When you address a problem, though, you can actually help solve a problem. There was a recent article that showed that a $31 million combined research and outreach exercise on fetal alcohol syndrome dramatically dropped the rate of births of fetal alcohol syndrome in the Native population. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we can do that with the suicide problem as well. And we're working very hard to get an Institute of Medicine study. IARPIC is generally in support of this to begin to address the suicide problem quite strongly. When you talk about changing ice sheets and what we're losing with ice in the north, look also at the statistics of the number of Alaska Native kids who do not speak the language of their grandparents. We're losing that faster than we're losing the ice. And we need our Arctic research. We're very proud that one of our goals is a humanities goal to help protect indigenous languages, identities, and culture. As we move to the changing ice sheets, as a result of this major change in the Arctic, we're seeing threats to other things we value. And this is a place where research can have a major effect on sustainability. I saw Dr. Rosa Meehan this morning and the team that she's had working on polar bears. Very important. We're going to try to help to see what we can do to improve U.S.-Russia cooperation in Arctic research this year. We've talked about eroding beaches and the change in methane. This is Dr. Katie Walter's glove, and you may have all seen her movie now about methane erupting from Arctic lakes. The amount of methane that is coming out in the Siberian tundra alone equals the greenhouse gas impact of all the cars, trucks, trains, and planes in California. And that's before these recent ocean studies that came out. It's a very significant change to the world. Ocean acidification. I had crab for dinner the night before last. I like eating crab. It worries me that in this generation or in this century, at the rate of acidification that we're seeing, very important shellfish species, very large that we eat, small that our salmon eat, may not be able to form their shells. A very important piece of research for sustainability. We had a presentation yesterday from Brooks Yeager on the effort of the Arctic Council countries to address the issue of soot, which may be explaining agricultural fires, forest fires, may be explaining the faster retreat of ice in the Arctic. And we are supportive of the Black Carbon Task Force as well. So besides all these challenges, we're also looking at what some people call opportunities, but really our challenges for sustainability. The trade routes in the Arctic were the subject of a major debate in the European Parliament this week and how that regulation should come about. One of the things that I'm proud of that we've been able to do is the Arctic Research Commission has helped sponsor the 8-nation Arctic Marine Shipping Assessment. When I give this to university libraries, I say put this up on the shelf of those leather-covered books of all those explorers' records that governments have sent explorers to the Arctic for 500 years on trade routes. This is the first time that the governments have come together to say, how do we do these trade routes safely? And a large part of the agenda that came out of this is common research. Another issue reflecting national priorities is the need for clean, stable cost energy. Wind diesel projects in the Arctic. We are very happy that the U.S. Department of Energy now has a full-time staffer in Alaska working some of these issues. Geothermal prospects are being looked at across the state. And very interesting international attention on the challenges of gas hydrates. With energy development also comes risks of oil spills. We approved a white paper yesterday calling on the United States government to keep the promises of the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. The Oil Pollution Act of 1990 said that we would have in this nation at least a $20 million a year continuous oil spill research program. When we collect things like $2.7 billion for leases in the Chukchi Sea, and we can barely put together or count to $4 or $5 million on oil spill and ice research in the country, we got environmentalists and the oil industry, oil spill responders, and citizens together at a workshop last week, all to agree it's time to start spending some of that 8 cents a barrel we collect for every barrel that is produced or imported into the United States to go back to that commitment for research. I've already talked about the Arctic Observing Network, and I just want to say that this week you'll see the national funders for SAON, this group coming together to have a very good wired for sound monitoring network in the Arctic, and I want to applaud all of you who are working on that project. There will be this spring a high latitude report by the U.S. Coast Guard talking about their needs in the Arctic, and science is very key to the work that the Coast Guard does. Science, as you know, helps sustain us in many different ways, but take a look at the things that we've talked about: oil spill research, Arctic Ocean research, fisheries cooperation. All of these require important seagoing, all-weather, all-conditions platforms. And those of you who are experts in sea ice will tell you that while the ice levels are receding, there still is ice there, and you still need an all-weather, all-hazards ice capability. And it's important that our nation make that commitment. And science is very much a part of that commitment. So to summarize, to sustain Arctic research, we need the goals and questions. We need research plans and policy. We need people, and we need a pipeline for people, and we need to support people to keep Arctic research going. We need to continue to build cooperation, infrastructure, education, and outreach, and I believe if we provide the American people answers, they're going to continue to support Arctic research. You're going to see a work plan from the Commission in the next year to get you a good, clear, transparent crosscut and to develop an Arctic research policy for the nation, which I believe will be significant to help sustain this for a long time to come. So I'll finish again with my punchline. What you do, ladies and gentlemen, not only sustains Arctic research, it helps sustain an area of the world we love and depend on, and the world depends on, to moderate our climate and to produce so much for the country and for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mead, for your remarks. It's especially ensuring and reassuring that, as in the remarks by the previous speakers, that the link between science and sustainability and the people who are depending on sustainability environments is being made more and more directly and filtering into our research agenda.